We live in an era that demands our constant evolution, whispering that we are forever incomplete. We are told to optimize our minds, our bodies, and our souls, turning our very existence into an endless project of repair. Now, let us explore the profound wisdom found not in adding more, but in letting go. Consider the modern landscape of human existence. From the moment we awaken to the harsh light of a new day, we are met with a pervasive, subtle narrative insisting that we are simply not enough. It is a quiet anxiety humming continuously in the background of our daily routines. We are bombarded with methodologies for becoming more productive, more serene, more resilient, and more enlightened. Life, rather than being a mystery to be experienced, is framed as a problem to be solved, a wild, overgrown garden that must be ruthlessly pruned and manicured into a state of artificial perfection. We treat ourselves as raw material, as rough drafts awaiting endless rounds of revision. This is the ordinary world we inhabit, a world where the pursuit of a better self has become the ultimate moral imperative, the unquestioned religion of the contemporary age. Yet, beneath the glossy veneer of self-optimization lies a profound and silent tragedy. The relentless drive to improve ourselves is not, as we are so often promised, the antidote to our deep-seated insecurities. Instead, it is the very engine that manufactures them. When we embark on the project of self-improvement, we unwittingly establish a fundamental dichotomy within our own minds. We draw a sharp, unforgiving line between who we are right now and who we imagine we ought to be. We create an idealized phantom of our future self who is perfectly calm, universally loved, flawlessly efficient, and entirely devoid of human frailty. And in the radiant, blinding light of this imaginary paragon, our present reality appears inevitably, embarrassingly inadequate. The tragedy lies in the fact that this ideal self is a mirage, a moving horizon that recedes exactly as fast as we approach it. The moment we achieve one milestone of self-mastery, the mind, conditioned by the habit of deep dissatisfaction, immediately erects a new, loftier goal. We are caught on a psychological treadmill, running to the point of absolute spiritual exhaustion but never actually moving forward. The insecurity we feel is not a sign that we have failed at the game of self-improvement, rather, it is the natural, unavoidable byproduct of playing the game in the first place. By constantly measuring ourselves against a standard of perfection that does not exist in nature, we condemn ourselves to a perpetual state of lack. We tell ourselves that we will finally be worthy of peace, of love, of rest, only when the project is complete. But the project is never complete. To understand the depth of this trap, we must examine the very mechanics of the mind that seeks to improve itself. When you declare, "I must change myself," a curious and impossible division occurs. The psyche splits into two conflicting entities: the I who is doing the changing, and the me who is being changed. We become the master and the student, the judge and the defendant, the sculptor and the clay. We establish an internal dictatorship where one fragment of our consciousness attempts to bully, coerce, and manipulate another fragment into submission. But this division is a hallucination. There is no separate I standing outside of your thoughts, your feelings, and your habits, wielding a wrench to fix them. The mind that judges the anxiety is made of the exact same substance as the anxiety itself. The desire to escape your present state is just another movement of the very mind that feels trapped. It is like trying to bite your own teeth, or trying to lift yourself up by pulling on your own shoelaces. The harder the internal taskmaster whips the self into shape, the more the self rebels, fractures, and suffers. This internal conflict is the root of our modern psychological exhaustion. We are utterly depleted by the civil war raging within us. We spend our days violently rejecting our current emotional reality in favor of a theoretical equilibrium that never arrives. If we feel sad, we immediately layer upon the sadness an intense anxiety that we should not feel sad, followed by a frantic search for a technique to eradicate the sadness. Thus, the original, natural emotion is amplified into a monstrous knot of suffering. We are no longer simply experiencing life, we are constantly evaluating, grading, and correcting our experience of life. By viewing ourselves as eternal works in progress, we systematically deny ourselves the grace of arrival. We indefinitely postpone our living. We whisper a dangerous lie to our deepest selves: I will be happy tomorrow, when the anxiety is finally gone. I will be worthy next year, when my daily habits are completely optimized. In doing so, we drain the present moment of its vitality, treating the now merely as a waiting room, a stepping stone, a frustrating obstacle on the way to an end. We are sleepwalking through our actual lives, captivated by a dream of a future perfection that exists nowhere but in our own restless imaginations. The more aggressively we strive to escape the perceived flaws of our present reality, the more heavily those flaws weigh upon us, anchoring us to the very suffering we seek to transcend. This is the profound paradox of our psychological well-being. The culture of relentless self-betterment, disguised as the ultimate path to happiness, is the invisible architect of our despair. It promises a final destination of profound inner peace, yet it ensures we remain forever agitated, forever hungry, and forever looking over our own shoulders in self-judgment. The ordinary world we accept as normal is, in truth, a beautifully decorated cage of our own construction. We are bound not by our inherent human flaws, but by our frantic, desperate attempts to erase them. If the pursuit of a better self is indeed the architect of our despair, we are forced to confront a bewildering dilemma. We are brought to the very edge of our familiar understanding, standing before the great trial of our internal journey. The challenge here is not to fight harder, nor to find a newer, more efficient weapon with which to conquer our flaws. The trial is to look directly at the weapon itself and realize that it is made of the very same material as the enemy. We must investigate the profound paradox of trying to change, exposing the futile loop of our inner conflicts by recognizing a startling truth: the mind that is trying to improve is the exact same mind that is supposedly flawed. To grasp this, we must first observe how our language plays a subtle but devastating trick upon our perception. When we speak, we use phrases like, "I need to control my anger," or "I must overcome my anxiety," or "I want to improve myself." In the fundamental structure of these sentences, a distinct and physical division is implied. There appears to be a separate, pure, and rational I, a sort of spiritual director sitting high in the control room of the brain who is looking down upon a wild, unruly me that desperately requires management. We construct a phantom manager whose sole job is to whip the unruly employee into shape. But if we sit quietly and look very closely at our direct experience, where exactly is this manager? Where is the I that exists entirely independent of the thoughts, feelings, and anxieties it claims to observe and correct? What we discover is that this division is an absolute illusion. There is no separate thinker behind the thoughts, there is only the continuous process of thinking. There is no separate feeler behind the feelings, there is only the unbroken flow of emotion. When you feel deeply insecure, you are not a calm, detached entity observing insecurity from a safe distance in that moment, you are the insecurity. The entire system is quaking. And here lies the catastrophic glitch in the project of relentless self-improvement. When the quaking mind says, "I must stop quaking, I must become still," it is the quaking itself that is speaking. The frantic desire to escape the insecurity is, in fact, the ultimate manifestation of that very insecurity. Imagine a thief who has cleverly dressed himself in the uniform of a police officer, actively leading the local search party to find the thief. He will look absolutely everywhere, he will turn over every stone, he will interrogate every suspect, and he will appear incredibly busy, righteous, and productive. But the one place he will never, ever look is in the mirror. He will never catch the culprit because the seeker is the exact one being sought. In the exact same way, the ego, the constructed, fragile sense of self that feels inherently inadequate, dons the noble disguise of the improver. It reads the philosophical books, it attends the optimization seminars, it practices the rigid morning routines, and it vows to finally defeat its own flaws. But the entity doing the improving is the very entity that feels fundamentally broken. Therefore, the more intensely you try to fix yourself, the more you implicitly reinforce the deeply held, subconscious belief that you are damaged goods. You are feeding the thief while pretending to hunt him. This internal civil war is the primary source of our profound psychological exhaustion. We treat our inner life as a hostile environment that must be aggressively terraformed and policed. We attempt to smooth out the rough waves of our minds using a hot flat iron. But the mind is a fluid, dynamic process. When you press a hot iron onto the surface of a turbulent ocean in an attempt to forcefully flatten it, you only succeed in creating more agitation, more steam, and more violent chaos. The effort to forcefully pacify the mind is itself an act of extreme mental violence. When an anxious thought arises naturally, and we immediately react with a secondary, aggressive thought, "I shouldn't be thinking this, I need to be present, I am failing at being calmly," have not eliminated the anxiety. We have merely added a heavy layer of resistance and guilt on top of it. We have trapped the original, passing emotion in a pressurized chamber of our own harsh judgment. This relentless feedback loop, the anxiety about being anxious, the deep fear of being afraid, the intense frustration over feeling frustrated, is the true, inescapable prison of the modern psyche. We are caught in a psychological quicksand where our frantic struggling to pull ourselves out only drags us deeper into the mire. The great spiritual philosophies of the East, particularly the wisdom of Zen and Taoism, have long recognized the immense tragedy of this struggle. They suggest that the human mind is a naturally self-regulating system, much like a physical ecosystem or a complex biological organism. A cut on your hand heals not because you aggressively, consciously command the individual cells to divide, but because you clean the wound, protect it, and then entirely get out of the way. The body possesses a profound, innate wisdom. The mind, too, possesses this innate, beautiful equilibrium, but it is constantly disrupted, short-circuited, and broken by our frantic, neurotic attempts to manually operate it. Consider the classic, timeless metaphor of a pool of muddy water. If you are holding a glass of water that is heavily clouded with dirt and silt, how do you go about making it perfectly clear? If you plunge your hand into the glass and try to forcefully push the dirt to the bottom, you will only stir it up further. The harder you work to clarify the water, the murkier and more turbulent it becomes. The only possible way to clear muddy water is to leave it entirely alone. You must allow it to sit perfectly still on the table, and in that complete cessation of effort, the dirt naturally, effortlessly settles to the bottom by its own weight, leaving the water crystal clear and pure above. Yet, the prospect of leaving our minds alone absolutely terrifies us. This is the crux of our hero's trial. We have been so deeply conditioned to believe that without the tyrannical whip of constant self-correction and relentless goal-setting, we will inevitably devolve into chaos. The fragile ego screams that if we stop trying to aggressively improve, we will become catastrophic failures, we will become profoundly unlovable, we will stagnate, and we will decay. We mistakenly equate non-action with laziness, and we confuse acceptance with apathetic resignation. But the non-action spoken of in profound philosophy, the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, or effortless action, is not a passive, defeated collapse. It is a state of supreme, alert intelligence. It requires the profound, world-shattering courage to stand face-to-face with your own internal chaos, your darkest insecurities, and say with a steady voice, "I see you perfectly, and I will not fight you." When we finally recognize the absolute futility of the self-improvement loop, when we see the policeman and the thief are one and the same, a remarkable, quiet shift begins to occur within our consciousness. We completely stop treating our current state of being as a fatal disease to be urgently cured. We begin to see that the sudden sorrow, the gripping anxiety, the chronic overthinking, and the deep insecurity are not malfunctions of the human machine, they are simply the natural, passing weather of the mind. And just as you cannot possibly control the physical weather by standing in a field and shouting angrily at the storm clouds, you cannot control your internal weather by violently battling your own passing thoughts. You come to realize that you are the vast, open sky in which the clouds temporarily appear. The infinite sky is not fundamentally damaged by a raging thunderstorm, nor is it actually improved by a beautiful, sunny day. It simply holds both extremes with infinite space, total grace, and zero resistance. The sky does not try to improve itself, it simply is. And in that realization, the exhausting trial of becoming someone else begins to dissolve, leaving space for the profound peace of simply being exactly who you are. When we finally surrender the exhausting burden of self-improvement, we do not collapse into a state of stagnant apathy, rather, we awaken to the profound clarity of complete present acceptance. This is the ultimate return from our internal trial, the realization that true psychological well-being arises precisely at the moment we peacefully drop the impossible task of becoming someone else. We step off the endless treadmill of optimization and find, to our great astonishment, that the ground beneath our feet has always been completely solid. The desperate search for a better self was the very mechanism obscuring the innate wholeness that was already there. To embrace this acceptance is to recognize a fundamental truth about the nature of human experience. The future, where our idealized, flawless self supposedly resides, is nothing more than a conceptual ghost. It is an abstract projection of a mind intensely dissatisfied with the now. If we condition our peace upon arriving at some future state of perfection, we ensure that we will never actually experience peace, because we can only ever live in the present moment. Tomorrow never arrives, it is always experienced as another today. The practice, therefore, is not to meticulously change who you are so that you can finally relax. The practice is to relax into exactly who you are, without demanding that a single thing be different. Consider the way we listen to a beautiful piece of music. We do not listen to a symphony with the sole intention of reaching the final chord. If the purpose of music were merely to get to the end, the best conductors would simply play the final crashing note and be done with it. But we understand intrinsically that music is a playful unfolding in the present. We do not dance to arrive at a specific point on the floor. The joy is entirely in the dancing itself. Yet, when it comes to our own inner lives, we treat ourselves as a frantic race toward an imaginary finish line. We reduce the rich, complex, and sometimes chaotic symphony of our psychological experience into a cold problem that must be swiftly solved. But the anxiety, the joy, the fear, and the peace are all essential notes in the music of your existence. To forcefully silence one is to destroy the entire composition. We are often terrified that if we drop the heavy whip of self-improvement, we will simply regress into our worst habits. We mistakenly assume that the harsh tension of self-criticism is the only structure holding our lives together. But when you remove the artificial constraint of the internal critic, you do not become a failure, you become natural. A tree does not need a consultant to tell it how to grow, nor does it suffer from deep anxiety about whether its branches are perfectly symmetrical. It simply responds to its environment with an innate, effortless intelligence. In the same way, when we stop forcing ourselves into a predetermined mold of betterment, our natural intelligence takes over. Our actions begin to arise from a place of genuine curiosity and unforced engagement, rather than out of a desperate, fearful need to prove our own worth. What happens, then, when we abandon the urge to improve and instead adopt the posture of a quiet, curious observer? A profound alchemy takes place. When a feeling of deep insecurity arises, we no longer rush to crush it with positive affirmations or suppress it with rigid productivity. Instead, we invite it in as a temporary guest. We sit with the insecurity, observe its passing texture, and allow it to move through us without attaching a catastrophic storyline to its presence. We discover that the feeling itself is entirely harmless. It is only our violent resistance to the feeling that causes us true suffering. This is the great paradox. Completely resolved by giving up the frantic pursuit of perfection, we find the very peace we were endlessly searching for. We realize that the self we were trying to fix is an illusion, and the life we are actually living is, and always has been, entirely enough. You are not a broken machine in need of constant repair. You are an unfolding process of nature. When we fully accept this, the civil war within the mind ceases, and the energy previously wasted on fighting ourselves is liberated into a spontaneous, quiet joy. As this journey settles, consider what might happen if, just for today, you completely dropped the heavy project of fixing yourself. Try this simple reflection the next time a feeling of inadequacy arises. Gently say to it, "I see you, and you are allowed to be here." Notice what happens in that open space. Subscribe to continue this journey inward and discover the quiet freedom of simply being. The climax of this journey is the profound surrender of the idealized self. The price paid by the hero is the death of the ego's greatest illusion, the comforting, yet exhausting, belief that one can eventually control, fix, and perfect their way into inner peace. The reward for paying this price is the realization of innate wholeness. By relentlessly striving for an impossible, manufactured standard of perfection we inadvertently generate the exact feelings of inadequacy and anxiety we are trying to escape. True liberation occurs when we dissolve the cause by dropping the standard, allowing the effect to naturally fade away. Thank you for stepping into the quiet space of this reflection. If this philosophical shift resonated with you, I invite you to share your experience with the I See You thought experiment in the comments below. Subscribe to Psychological Well-Being for more journeys into the nature of the mind.